Thanks for joining us, John. He's a managing partner at SQM, Frontier Management, I believe still across the river. That's right. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to maybe, if you can give a sense of what you do, because you've been one of the first pioneers about 20 years ago, if I remember correctly, in the capital markets in Africa. To let us know what you're doing now, and then if you could also let us know what you see trends are the next 12 months for investors. That would be very helpful.
Okay. Thanks very much. Sorry I was late. I guess SQM is an institutional investment firm. We manage money in Africa and the Middle East, and I focus on Africa. We focus on investing in all the stock markets outside South Africa, so all the difficult ones. I guess the reason for asking me to be here, I guess, is because I've been doing this for quite a long time. I worked at another firm called Emerging Markets Management, where more than 20 years ago we started the first fund to invest in markets in Africa. The IFC was one of the supporters of that fund, along with a lot of other institutional investors. So I guess what I would like to sort of talk about a little bit is really what's happened over those last 20 years, and there has been things change slowly, but in over 20 years things have changed a lot. So 20 years ago, it was very difficult, virtually impossible to try to get someone to even contemplate investing in Africa at all. There were a few kind of pioneering investors that wanted to invest in that fund then, which was $30 million to start out with. It's the first fund, I think, at that point. But over time, and at that point there was only 4 markets that were investable. Now there's 15 plus outside South Africa, and now we have kind of a problem, an inverse problem. Now it seems like there are a lot of people that want to invest in Africa. There's a whole slew of investors that now include frontier markets as part of their mandate, and as such they include Africa. There's been quite a few funds that have been created now. There's probably, I don't know actually how many funds, 50 plus probably. There's lots of funds. There's lots of interest where there were no funds and no interest 20 years ago. Now there's lots of money. The problem in today's African capital markets on the equity side is that the markets are too small. All the markets in Africa put together, even if you include the North African markets of Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, the market cap of everything outside South Africa is about 250 billion. That's smaller than Microsoft. So one company here, and that's not Apple, that's Microsoft, which is pretty big but not gigantic, right? And the trading volume is about 5% of what trades in Microsoft in terms of value, how much trades. So the universe is still quite small. And so I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is that there's been more and more funds getting created. There's been more and more brokerages created. The whole infrastructure is there, but there have not been that many companies to go public. There's not been that much capital raised in our part of the world. There's some, and there's some movements in that direction. In Tanzania, they just opened up the market to foreign investment. In Zambia, they're going to force some of the companies that are already listed to sell more shares in the market. There's a little bit of that, and we hope that there'll be some more IPOs coming to market. But I think over the next 5-10 years, you'll see this area grow, but it'll still be, it'll continue to be a slow-moving thing. I hope, my sort of hope 20 years ago was that, well, if we can invest in this place and we can make money for people, and that, the return that a pension fund in the US or the UK or wherever, or university, that return in Africa could do as well as emerging markets or some other place, then maybe some people would start to get interested. Now that's been proven right. Investments in Africa have done as well, if not better, than they have in other parts of the world. Now there's all this interest, and so now I think it's just a matter of letting things letting the markets work, and hopefully more countries will open up markets. Hopefully more governments will encourage companies to go public by doing things like reducing tax rates for companies that are listed than if they're not, that kind of thing. And hopefully these markets will get kicked off a bit more, and once they are, then the borrowing cost comes down for everybody that's operating in those countries. So that's really my
quick question to follow on.
cents.
Have you seen any in your universe, are investors asking any risk premium for Africa vis-a-vis other emerging markets, or not these days?
Not exactly. I mean, yes and no. I think that the emerging markets themselves are a bit more interesting to investors over the last 2 or 3 years. They haven't been as interesting. Partially, the big markets are largely driven by commodity-oriented companies. So emerging markets has become less, I don't know what you want to call it. When you invest in emerging markets, you want to invest in consumption and consumer plays and these things, where in countries where people, the average consumption of this is much lower than it is in the U.S. or in other places. And in a lot of the stocks in the emerging markets universe are no longer fall into that bucket. It's the small caps, mid caps, and frontier markets. So we've seen a huge amount of interest from people just wanting to invest in those kinds of companies.
Thank you very much.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.